Excellent. Okay, so before I start, I just quickly want to tell you guys what this talk is not about. So it's not a step-by-step tutorial on how to do Rails plus Mongo. It's not a discussion on why SQL is better than NoSQL, and not a discussion why NoSQL is better than SQL. It's also not that much of a technical talk, mostly because last night I Googled on how to prevent people from asking you difficult technical questions at the end of the talk, and Yahoo answer said, just tell people it's not a technical talk. What this is just an honest account of my team at OfficeZen's journey with Mongo over the past 2 years, the challenges we faced, the battles we fought, and how we survived. Okay, so to start off with, I just want to give you guys an overview of how we'll be traveling. We're going to start at the Shire, then move onto the realms of realization, through the mines of Moria, then past the desolation of data accessibility, through the woods of Lothlorien, and then finally into Mordor. So just a bit about myself. I'm Gys. You can call me Gys as well if you can't pronounce my name. Don't mind. That's me. That's Boromir. It's not really much of a poser. That's my handle for most things in life. You can follow me on Twitter. I've got 34 Twitter followers of 35. Like, thanks to Rubyfuza for following me as well. I only retweet Elon Musk, so there's not much going on there. I do have a YouTube video with over 1 million views, so that's something. So I've been in software development for the past 7 years. Before that, I was an engineer designing high-speed weighing applications. I actually got tricked into software developer, but that guy sitting over there told me we were going to build robots, and then ended up not doing that and building software. But something that I learned while building software is that you don't need a lot of software knowledge to build software products. I remember the first thing we did was build a computer vision application, and people thought I was a genius, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like copying and pasting code and looking it up, and it was working quite well. Okay, so start of the journey. So the Shire. The Shire is a lovely place to be. It was the land of Rails and Postgres, where I started a new project every couple of months. I never had to worry about scale. A lot of the complexity was abstracted away by people more competent than me. And I mostly was able to stay in that perfect place for about 2 years until Gandalf arrived. So Gandalf arrived, and he built a pretty decent MVP using Rails and Mongo. At that stage, I had no idea what Mongo really was. I knew people told me that you should not be using Mongo for your DB, but besides that, I thought, okay, well, that seems like a cool, shiny new proposition, building a real product, getting real users, so I just went with it. I did check out I did notice that we're not using active record, we're using Mongoid, which is the ORM for Mongo. It's not an ORM, it's an ODM. I only realized that afterwards, but anyway, so I thought, okay, great, let's just get going. So I started off with the journey. The journey went fairly well. We started churning out new features, getting more users. Things were going great. But then we started hearing a whisper of a growing evil in the West. That whisper came in the form of slow response times and angry users. And soon we realized we actually need to address this. And then we entered the realms of realization. So with a lot of badly constructed queries, the first thing we tried to do was to do a join. Now, I was that idiot that tried to join collections, and soon I realized that it was not possible. So we knew that we had a couple of issues we had to address. So one of the issues was our product was is relational by nature. I think Mongo works very well for certain types of products, not ours. And as a result, the data structure was also relational by nature. We were still a young company at that stage. That was a couple of months into the company's life cycle. Doing a rewrite of that would have taken a couple of weeks, and we haven't actually validated our business model, so So we essentially had to fork in the road. We could have either taken the time, switched to Postgres, or we could continue on with Mongo and just make it work. I would like to think that when Gandalf was presented with the dilemma of getting the ring to Mount Doom, he had a similar option. He could have asked the eagles just to fly it to Mount Doom, like 30 minutes, like everyone's happy, no one dies. Or he could have chosen the most inept creatures in Middle-earth with tiny legs to take it to Mordor. Like Gandalf, we chose the latter and continued on with Mongo. So to start off, we knew we had to kill ourselves up, get some sweet elven steel, get some mithril. And to do that, I went to something I learned when I was like a junior engineer. In the workshop, there was this big sign, RTFM. It basically urges you to read the manual. So that's what we did. We started doing all the obvious things. Beginning with starting to read like what is Mongo and how to use Mongo, like adding indexes on fields that you need large queries for. When you add those indexes, you actually need to run a script to add the indexes to your database. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Stay clear of relational data structures, use embedded documents, denormalize data, all of that, use good caching and so on. So we were feeling good about ourselves. We were kitted out, ready to slay some goblins and face the cave troll, and we entered the mines of Moria. Unfortunately, the dwarves delved too deeply and too greedy, and soon we were faced with an enemy of fire and shadow in the form of legacy data structures that could not be easily be denormalized. And we knew we had to make a plan. Our mere mortal weapons were no match for this enemy. So just to actually explain what the issue was, one of our main features is the list of profiles that a user can see. Now, when I joined, that list was fairly small. I think it was like 5 profiles, so no one really felt the pain of the list taking long to load. As we started to scale, the list became longer and longer and longer, and soon it was a very long list. I just added Treebeard and Boromir for references on how long the list was. So we were sort of backed in a corner. There was nothing in terms of Mongo that we can do better to sort of help that to like deal with this issue. So luckily, someone in my team had the great idea of using in-memory to store the list. Sorry, before I get to that. So just to explain the problem in detail, the profile is made out of a lot of associated documents. Each one of those, or most of those documents also have associated documents. Now, when you have a SQL DB, that's fine because you do a join across tables and Bob's your uncle. But when you are using NoSQL, then you have to fetch the foreign ID. So say, for instance, you want to get all the names for the cities that's associated with a single profile. Then you need to fetch the foreign IDs from the profile, do a lookup in the city from the city's collection, and then get the names of the fields. It's complicated, and this is a simplified version. So you can imagine looping over all the profiles took quite some time. So then we came up with the solution of using a cached list to actually serve the data. So that worked fairly well. There's a couple of components that we used to do that. The one being we had a state machine that governed the life cycle of each profile. There's a couple of nice state machine gems that you can check out. We just built our own one because after doing some research, we figured out that it's just because of the way we're using it, we couldn't use it off the shelf or off the Ruby Gems state machine. The next component was just to use Redis. Redis is a super tool. I'm guessing most of you know that pretty well, so I'm not going to explain that. And the third one was just using Sidekick, which is very complementary to Redis, just to actually construct a hash, and then add it to the Redis list. One thing that also counted in our favor was that once the data was added to the list, there was no need to actually update the profile. If it wasn't for that, we would have had a bit of an problem, but we could go with the assumption that once the profile was added to the list, it was pretty much set until it was removed again. We went through a couple of iterations, mostly on the way that we actually stored the list in Redis, or Redis, like I'm never sure which one to say, but it was mostly the concept remained the same up until today. Okay, so that battle was won. We exited the mines of Moria. We lost Gandalf. But we moved on to the distillation of data accessibility. Now, side note, I know this isn't exactly canon, but just bear with me. So we had a smallish issue way at the beginning of our journey. In order to actually know whether your business is winning or losing or dying, you need to be able to access the data to get some business insights. Whether it is to do like, or whether you want to just do queries against a DB or build dashboards or whatever. The problem is with the NoSQL DB, you can't actually do SQL queries against it. And building dashboards is also quite tricky. So what we just told people is to, hey, just use Rails admin, just like download the CSV file, import it to Excel, do some Excel magic, get a dashboard, repeat the next day. And it worked, and I mean, it wasn't my problem because I wasn't doing it. I was focusing on building cool features. It worked fairly well, but then one morning, Smart arrived with Fire and Dev and started torching our server. We had no idea what was going on until we actually started looking at the logs. So our dynos were dying one after the other. And what was happening was that there's a new guy that started at the office, and he was trying to do some data analytics, and he was downloading huge amounts of CSV files, and it was taking quite a long time. We were hosting on a Roku. It had a 30-second time limit. The CSVs were downloading synchronously. We didn't have any rack protection, so it was basically killing one dyno after the other. Yeah, so we removed his access and then figured we need to make a plan to actually get a sustainable system going. So first solution we came up with was, just to demonstrate the issue again, we have basically a stack of papers, need to get dashboards and to run SQL queries. So first solution we came up with was to use Google Sheets. So pretty powerful tool to use. What we did was, and it's pretty simple to set up. So all you need to do to actually route your data to a Google Sheet is create a Google script, link it to your developers console, get some auth keys. Then you can create a Ruby script using Google's API client gem. And then start pushing the data to Sheets by running the Ruby script asynchronously, not synchronously. We did it with Sidekick. We actually spent a fair amount of time making the sort of service quite dry. So we always talked about packaging it as a gem, never did it. So if anyone wants, I can just send you the code. And that solution worked fairly well. The only issues with that was that whenever we had to create a new table, add a new column, then code changes was necessary. And I mean, we like working on features, not like adding new tables. So, and also the jobs was becoming massive. It was taking, at some stage, like between 30 minutes and 60 minutes to actually just to run one sheet. And it was hitting our DB quite hard. I'm not sure actually what the impact was, but I'm sure it wasn't good. So we went for the second solution, which we knew from the get-go was the best solution. Essentially getting our data into a SQL DB and accessing it in a BI tool. There's a couple of BI tools available, Looker, Tableau. We just use Looker because we've used it before. And Also, we use Redshift just because we've used it before, not because we have a large amount of data. So getting the connection between Redshift and BI is pretty simple. Getting the connection between Mongo and Redshift, that's quite tricky. So investigated a couple of options. The one being that you can periodically run Mongo export that essentially dumps a CSV file to S3, then you can do some magic to get it into Redshift. Luckily, I did read the Mongo documentation, and there's a big section there in red that says, don't use Mongo export for production DB. So didn't go for that option. Then the second option was you can write a script to tail your Mongo logs and then continuously route data to Redshift. Now, we actually investigated this option quite thoroughly. We found a company that did it, and it took, I think, a team of 2 or 4 engineers over 6 months to get an ETL of like an hour. We had like one barely competent guy spending 20% of his time on the solution. So we went for option number 3, which is just to use an ETL service that does that for you. So we use Stitch Data, which I can definitely recommend. It's like super. Although I did get a notification, I have to up our payment tier later this week. So, but it works fairly well. Okay, so sweet. We finished all our battles, lost a few people along the way, but we finally entered the woods of Lothlorien. And like the elves, I'm not sure if you guys know the elves, but they pay quite a lot of attention to detail, like fine buildings and so on. Quite beautiful there. But we started caring more about the look and the feel of the product. Now, I would like to think that our product was looking pretty well, and the user experience was not bad, but the scalability of our front end was a bit of an issue. At that stage, we were using a combination of ERB templates, jQuery, handlebars, Garn SAS, a bunch of sort of tools, which it's great if you start off with, but it becomes quite messy and it's not that great to scale. So we need to grow up and like get a proper front-end framework, which we did, and what we got was React, because it was just nice, and React and Rails just sound nice together. So what we used was a gem called React on Rails. It essentially allows you to incrementally replace parts of your front end with a React app. So our vision is that we'll replace our whole front end using that method, and then eventually move everything to a single page app. So it gives you stuff like how it works is it essentially loads a React component within your view. It allows you to pass props via your controller to your React components, and it gives you Redux and React router integration out of the box. Okay, so sweet. We had our sort of decent front end, but we still had to figure out like what are we going to do with an API and a serializer. So we had some issues like figuring out like what type of API we need to do. I'm not going to talk about that because that's not that interesting. But what we struggled with quite significantly was figuring out like what serializer to use. At that stage, we were still sort of constructing hashes all across our controllers. It was quite messy, and we knew we had to actually look at something decent. I knew from experience there was a couple of decent serializers that you can use with Active Record. We're not using Postgres, so I looked at Mongo serializers. Unfortunately, because our data is structured in a relational design, we couldn't use any of the Mongo serializers that we found. Also, another issue was that because just of legacy features, the data was represented differently depending on where in the app you were using it. So we decided to just build our own serializer, which you can check out if you have a similar problem. Good luck. But we did publish it as a gem, and it's open sourced. So essentially what this does, it allows you to to construct a custom hash for your models, and as well as all associated documents. It allows you to update any fields of your models, as well as fields from associated documents, and it allows you to apply scopes, which essentially allows you to display, to format the data differently depending on when the app you want to use it. So it's working pretty nicely. We've been going with it now for at least 6 months, so and we're quite happy with it. If you have any questions about this, I was not the guy that wrote it. The guy that wrote this told me I should not point him out, but he's sitting over there. So okay, so unfortunately this journey doesn't end with us making it to Mordor and chucking the proverbial ring into Mount Doom. We're still using Mongo. We're still trying to sneak past the eye of Sauron, getting into Mordor. But I did make a commitment to my team sitting over there that we will be moving away from Mongo this year. So I guess the question is whether if we could go back in time, whether it was worth it. If we had all the data, definitely difficult to say. You can't time travel, so I mean that's not worthwhile asking that question. I have worked on multiple products where the lifetime of the product was less than a couple of months. So spending like 2 weeks or 4 weeks on a rewrite is definitely dangerous. And I don't really want to play the at least we've learned something card, but we did actually learn a couple of cool things. One being that the Mongo way. So previously, the only DB experience I had was with SQL DBs. So that was the only tool in my arsenal. Now I know like what to use Mongo for and how to use it, which is definitely useful. We have a small service we call Santa. It's an acronym for sending awesome new t-shirts automatically. So, and we use Mongo for that service because it's a standalone service. It only uses one thing, which is gifts. If we ever, and it's quite flexible, if we ever wanted to, say for instance, start sending flamethrowers, then we can very easily, just by one line, add that in. We figured out how to develop a caching strategy that actually works. I mean, I've dealt with caching before. It's very difficult to actually get right. And we figured out what all the caveats were. Also how to build a serializer for Mongo. I mean, I didn't do that personally, but at least I got to look under the hood a bit. I think as developers, a lot of the complexity for some of the tools are very often abstracted away. And it's actually nice to have the opportunity to dive into something and to figure out sort of how it works. And then I learned like you never should invite Gandalf into your home, and I'm definitely never going back to the Shire. The end.